Adrienne Hawthorne had always been a woman of routine. Every morning, she would wake up at 6:30 sharp, brew a pot of coffee, and methodically prepare breakfast for her family before the chaos of the day unfolded. She cherished this predictability, finding comfort in knowing exactly what to expect. But on this particular Wednesday morning, as she stood in the doorway of their master bathroom watching her husband of 16 years, her world tilted on its axis. Garrett emerged from the shower with his phone in hand, a smile playing on his lips as he stared at the screen, completely oblivious to her presence. His hair was damp, droplets of water trailing down his bare chest, but it wasn't his state of undress that made Adrienne's heart clench painfully. It was the look of pure happiness on his face, a look she hadn't seen directed at her in months, maybe years. "How long has this been going on?" The words slipped out before she could stop them, quiet yet piercing in the steam-filled room. Garrett froze, his thumb hovering over the phone screen. The smile vanished instantly, replaced by a flash of panic that confirmed her worst suspicions. For a moment, they just stared at each other, 16 years of shared history suspended between them like the steam from the shower. "What are you talking about?" he finally managed, but his voice lacked conviction. His eyes darted away from hers, fixing on a spot on the tiled floor. "Don't play games with me, Garrett." Adrienne's voice was surprisingly steady, despite the tremor she felt building inside her chest. "Your phone, the secret smiles, the late nights at the office, the new clothes. I'm not stupid." Garrett quickly darkened his phone screen and set it face down on the counter. "You're being paranoid, Adrienne. It was just work emails." "Then let me see it." She extended her hand, palm up. "If it's just work, you won't have a problem handing over your phone right now, exactly as it is." His jaw tightened. "After 16 years of marriage, you don't trust me?" He grabbed a towel and wrapped it around his waist, creating a barrier between them that felt symbolic. "I don't need to prove anything to you." The irony of his words wasn't lost on Adrienne. Just 1 year ago, they had renewed their vows on their crystal anniversary. 15 years together, celebrated with a small, intimate ceremony where they had toasted to the transparency and beauty of their relationship. Crystal, transparent, yet fragile, a perfect metaphor for what their marriage had become. She had worn blue sapphire earrings that day, a gift from Garrett, who claimed the deep blue stones matched the depth of his love for her. Now, as she stood in their bathroom, wearing those same earrings, she felt the weight of them pulling at her earlobes. "You're right," Adrienne said quietly. "You don't need to prove anything. Your reaction just did all the proving necessary." A heavy silence fell between them, filled only by the rhythmic drip of the shower faucet. "Adrienne," Garrett started, his voice softer now, placating. "Come on. You're making something out of nothing. I've been under a lot of pressure at work. The Richardson project is—" "Stop!" She held up her hand. "Just stop. If you hand me that phone right now, or look me in the eyes and tell me the truth, even if it hurts, maybe we still have a chance." Their gazes locked, a silent challenge passing between them. For a fleeting moment, she saw hesitation in his eyes, perhaps even a desire to come clean. But then he glanced at the phone on the counter and shook his head. "There's nothing to tell." Adrienne felt something break inside her, a final thread of hope snapping. "Then I want a divorce." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and irrevocable. Garrett's face paled, as though he hadn't expected her to go that far. Had he really thought she would just accept his lies indefinitely? That she wouldn't eventually draw a line? "You don't mean that," he said, taking a step toward her. Adrienne stepped back. "Don't touch me. And yes, I absolutely mean it." "Peter," she turned and walked out of the bathroom, her legs somehow carrying her despite feeling like they might give out at any moment. Behind her, she heard Garrett call her name, but she didn't stop. She needed space, needed to breathe air that wasn't thick with the smell of his betrayal. In the bedroom, she sat on the edge of their king-sized bed, a purchase they had deliberated over for weeks, before deciding it was worth the splurge. She ran her hand over the Egyptian cotton sheets that she meticulously changed every Sunday. How many small decisions, investments, and habits had they built together over 16 years? And how quickly it could all unravel with just a few words and a suspicious text message. Cindy would be leaving for school soon. At 15, their daughter was perceptive, too perceptive sometimes. Adriana knew she had to pull herself together before facing her. Dexter, their 7-year-old son, was easier to fool. He existed in a bubble of childhood innocence that Adrian desperately wanted to preserve. She heard the bathroom door open and close again, followed by the sounds of Garrett getting dressed. Neither spoke. The silence felt like a physical presence in the room, taking up space between them. When Garrett finally left for work, earlier than usual, Adrian remained sitting on the bed, staring at the wall, trying to process how her carefully constructed life had just imploded. It wasn't a complete shock, if she was being honest with herself. There had been signs for months that Cindy had picked up on before she did. New cologne, designer shirts that weren't his usual style, late-night texts that he would quickly hide when she entered the room, credit card statements with charges at restaurants she'd never been to. Just last night, Cindy had confronted her in the kitchen while they were loading the dishwasher. "Mom, have you noticed anything different about Dad lately?" Adrian had paused, a dinner plate suspended mid-air. "What do you mean?" Cindy shrugged, but her eyes were serious. "I don't know. He's just acting weird. He's always checking his phone and smiling at it. And he bought those fancy new shirts. Dad never cared about clothes before." The observation had struck Adrian like a physical blow. Her own daughter had noticed what she had been trying so hard to ignore. Later that evening, while Garrett was in the shower, she had finally done what she had been resisting for weeks. She had checked their shared credit card statement online. There it was, a charge at Brennan's Jewelry for $375 from 3 weeks ago. Adrian hadn't received any jewelry from Garrett in months. That discovery had led her to make an appointment with Dr. Catherine Winters, not for medical advice, but for legal counsel. The consultation had been brief, but informative. Dr. Winters had outlined what Adrian could expect in terms of asset division and custody arrangements. If your husband agrees to an uncontested divorce, it could be relatively quick, the lawyer had explained. But these things rarely stay simple when children and significant assets are involved. Adrian had thanked her, paid the consultation fee, and left without making any definitive plans. It was just information gathering, she told herself, just in case. And now, just in case, had become reality. The house was quiet after everyone left. Dexter had bounded off to the school bus with his usual enthusiasm, completely unaware of the tension between his parents at breakfast. Cindy, however, had given Adrian a long, searching look before heading out to meet her friends for their walk to the high school. She hadn't said anything, but her eyes had communicated volumes. Somehow, her daughter knew something was terribly wrong. Adrienne moved through the morning in a daze, mechanically completing her usual chores: laundry, dishes, grocery list. The mundane tasks that usually gave her satisfaction now seemed pointless. She caught herself standing in the middle of the kitchen, a bottle of fabric softener in hand, with no recollection of what she had intended to do with it. By noon, she had made up her mind. She would not live in limbo, waiting for Garrett to decide when or if he would tell her the truth. She would not compete with whatever or whoever was making him smile at his phone screen. She deserved more than that. Their children deserved more than a household built on lies and suspicion. She called Garrett's office, something she rarely did. His assistant put her through right away. "Adrian?" Garrett's voice was guarded. "Is everything okay?" "We need to talk tonight, after the kids are in bed," she said, keeping her tone neutral. "This isn't a conversation I want to have over the phone." There was a pause before Garrett replied, "All right. I'll be home by 6. Thank you." She hung up without waiting for his response. The rest of the day stretched out endlessly. Adrian tried to occupy herself with work emails. She managed accounts for an insurance firm and worked primarily from home, but found it impossible to concentrate. Instead, she began looking up rental properties in the area, trying to envision a life separate from the one she had built with Garrett. By the time she picked up Dexter from his after-school program and started preparing dinner, a strange calm had settled over her. It wasn't acceptance, not yet, but rather a sense of clarity. Whatever happened tonight, there would be no going back to the comfortable ignorance she had been living in. Garrett arrived home at exactly 6 o'clock, his face a carefully composed mask of neutrality. Cindy was in her room doing homework, and Dexter was in the living room, absorbed in his favorite cartoon show. "Hey, buddy," Garrett said, ruffling Dexter's hair as he passed. The boy looked up with adoring eyes. "Dad, you're home early. Can we play catch after dinner?" Garrett hesitated, glancing at Adrian, who stood in the kitchen doorway. "Maybe tomorrow, Dex. I've got some things to discuss with your mom tonight." Dexter's face fell for a moment before he shrugged. "Okay, tomorrow for sure." "For sure," Garrett promised, though something in his voice made Adrian wonder if he believed his own words. Dinner was a strained affair, with Cindy shooting suspicious glances between her parents and Dexter chattering obliviously about his day at school. Adrian pushed food around her plate, her appetite non-existent. Garrett made a show of eating normally, complimenting her on the roast chicken as if it were any other Wednesday night. After dinner, after Dexter's bedtime story and Cindy's reluctant goodnight, Adrian and Garrett faced each other across the kitchen island. 16 years of marriage distilled into this moment of reckoning. "I know," Adrian said simply. Garrett's shoulders slumped slightly, but his expression remained guarded. "What exactly do you think you know?" "I know you're having an affair." The words tasted bitter in her mouth. "What I don't know is who she is, or how long it's been going on, but I know it's happening." Garrett's gaze dropped to the granite countertop. For a long moment, he said nothing, and in his silence, Adrian heard confirmation. When he finally looked up, his eyes were filled with a mixture of guilt and defiance. "It's not what you think," he began, the classic opener of cheaters throughout history. Adrian laughed, a short, hollow sound. "Isn't it? Then explain it to me, Garrett. Explain the secret texts, the new clothes, the jewelry purchase that wasn't for me. Explain why you couldn't hand me your phone this morning." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she had once found endearing, but now seemed calculated to buy time. "It's complicated." "No," she countered, her voice steady. "It's actually very simple. Either you're faithful to your wife and family, or you're not. There's no complicated middle ground." Garrett's expression shifted from defensiveness to resignation. He pulled out one of the kitchen bar stools and sat heavily, as if his legs could no longer support the weight of his deception. "Her name is Jessica," he finally said, the words barely above a whisper. "Jessica Brennan. She works in marketing. We've been seeing each other for about 3 months." Adrian absorbed this information with a strange detachment, as if he were talking about strangers rather than destroying their marriage. Jessica Brennan. The name immediately conjured an image of someone young, vibrant, without the responsibilities of 2 children and a mortgage. Someone without 16 years of shared history that now seemed tarnished beyond recognition. 3 months, she repeated. The crystal anniversary celebration had been just 9 months ago. How quickly things had changed. "Is she the reason for the jewelry purchase on our credit card?" Garrett winced. "You saw that?" "Of course I saw it. We share accounts, Garrett. Did you think I wouldn't notice?" He had the decency to look ashamed. "It was stupid. I wasn't thinking." "No," Adrian agreed. "You weren't." She leaned against the counter, creating physical distance between them even as the emotional chasm widened. "So, what happens now? Do you love her?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with 16 years of shared memories, 2 children, a home they had built together. Garrett didn't answer immediately. and his hesitation told Adrienne everything she needed to know. "I don't know what I feel," he finally admitted. "It wasn't supposed to be anything serious. It just happened." "Things don't just happen, Garrett. You made choices. Every secret text, every lie about working late, every time you looked me in the eyes and said nothing was wrong. Those were all choices." He nodded, accepting her words without argument. "You're right. I'm not trying to justify it." "But you are," she countered. "By saying it just happened. You're absolving yourself of responsibility." "Seat." The conversation was interrupted by a small sound from the doorway. They both turned to find Dexter standing there in his dinosaur pajamas, clutching his stuffed triceratops. "I can't sleep," he said, his voice small in the tense atmosphere. "Are you guys fighting?" Adrienne quickly composed her features into a reassuring smile. "No, sweetie. Dad and I are just having a grown-up talk. Let's get you back to bed." She guided Dexter back upstairs, tucked him in, and stayed until his breathing evened out in sleep. When she returned to the kitchen, Garrett was still sitting at the island, staring at his clasped hands. "I want you to leave," Adrienne said quietly. "Not forever, necessarily, but I need space to think." Garrett looked up, surprise evident on his face. "Leave? Where would I go?" "That's not my problem," she replied, surprising herself with her own coldness. "A hotel, a friend's place, wherever. But I can't have you here right now. What about the kids? What will we tell them?" "We'll tell them you're on a business trip. For now. Until we figure out what happens next." Garrett seemed about to argue, but then thought better of it. "All right, I'll pack a bag." While he went upstairs to gather his things, Adrienne sat at the kitchen table, feeling both hollow and somehow heavier than before. This morning she had been a wife suspecting her husband of infidelity. Now she was a wife who knew, who had names and time frames, who was asking her husband to leave their home. The transformation had occurred in less than 12 hours, yet it felt like a lifetime had passed. When Garrett came downstairs with his overnight bag, he lingered awkwardly in the entryway. "I'm sorry, Adrienne. For what it's worth, I never wanted to hurt you." She looked at him. This man she had loved for so long, now a stranger in some fundamental way. "But you did hurt me, Garrett. And Cindy. And Dexter. Your choices hurt all of us." He nodded, unable to meet her gaze. "I know. I'll call tomorrow to check on the kids." After he left, the house felt simultaneously emptier and less suffocating. Adrienne moved through the rooms, turning off lights, a nightly ritual that now felt painfully ordinary in the face of such extraordinary circumstances. In the master bedroom, she caught sight of her reflection in the vanity mirror. She still wore the sapphire earrings, the ones Garrett had given her for their crystal anniversary. With trembling fingers, she removed them and placed them in her jewelry box. The next morning brought the challenge of explaining Garrett's absence to the children. Dexter accepted the business trip story without question, but Cindy's skeptical gaze told Adrienne that her daughter wasn't fooled. "Is Dad ever coming back?" Cindy asked bluntly, as Adrienne drove her to school. Adrienne's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I don't know, honey. Your father and I have some things to work through." Cindy was silent for a moment, absorbing this. "It's because he's cheating, isn't it?" The directness of the question nearly caused Adrienne to swerve. She glanced at her daughter, startled by the maturity and perception in those young eyes. "Why would you think that?" she asked carefully. Cindy rolled her eyes. "Mom, I'm 15, not 5. I see how he acts with his phone, how he's been dressing differently. Plus, I heard you guys talking last night. The walls aren't that thick." Adrienne sighed, realizing there was no point in shielding her daughter from a truth she had already deduced. "Yes, your father admitted to being involved with someone else." "What a cliché," Cindy muttered, looking out the window. "Middle-aged man has a crisis and cheats with probably some young woman at his office." Despite everything, Adrienne had to suppress a smile at her daughter's cynical assessment. "It's complicated, Cindy. Adult relationships sometimes are. It doesn't seem that complicated to me. Either you're loyal or you're not." Out of the mouths of babes. Adrian couldn't help but think that her 15-year-old daughter had just distilled the situation to its essence better than she herself had been able to. "I'm sorry you have to deal with this," Adrian said softly. No child should have to worry about their parents' marriage. Cindy turned to face her mother, her expression serious beyond her years. "I'm not the one you should be sorry for. Are you okay, Mom?" The question brought unexpected tears to Adrian's eyes. She blinked rapidly, focusing on the road ahead. "I will be. It might take some time, but I will be." "What are you going to do?" Adrian considered the question. What was she going to do? 24 hours ago, divorce had seemed like the only answer. Now, in the clear light of morning, with her daughter looking to her for guidance, the path forward seemed less certain. "I honestly don't know yet, honey. Your father and I need to have some more conversations. But whatever happens, I want you to know that we both love you and Dexter more than anything. That won't change." Cindy nodded slowly. "I know that, and whatever you decide, I'm on your side." "There don't need to be sides," Adrian said automatically, though part of her was touched by her daughter's loyalty. "Yeah, there kinda do," Cindy replied with the certainty of youth. "Dad messed up, not you." The rest of the drive passed in companionable silence. As Cindy got out of the car at school, she leaned back in for a moment. "Love you, Mom. Stay strong." "Tut." Those simple words of encouragement from her teenage daughter carried Adrienne through the morning as she went through the motions of her workday, responding to emails and participating in a video conference call with clients. She wondered if her colleagues could sense the upheaval in her personal life, or if her professional mask was intact. In the afternoon, she received a text from Garrett. "Can we talk tonight? I'll come by after the kids are asleep." Adrian stared at the message for a long time before responding with a simple, "Okay." She wasn't sure she was ready for another conversation so soon, but prolonging the inevitable wouldn't help anyone. She picked up Dexter from his after-school program, listening to his animated recounting of a science experiment involving baking soda and vinegar. His excitement was contagious, and for a few precious minutes, Adrian was able to forget about her crumbling marriage and just be a mom enjoying her son's enthusiasm. When they arrived home, Dexter ran to the front door, looking past Adrian expectantly. "Is Dad home from his trip yet?" The innocent question was like a knife to Adrian's heart. "No, sweetie, not yet. But he said he'll call you before bedtime to say goodnight." Dexter's face fell momentarily before he bounced back with the resilience of childhood. "Okay, can I have a snack? I'm starving." Dinner that night was a quieter affair without Garrett. Adrian noticed how Cindy kept glancing at her father's empty chair, her expression unreadable. Dexter, for his part, seemed to have accepted the business trip explanation without question, though he did ask twice more when Dad would be coming home. After Adrian had tucked Dexter into bed, and Garrett had called to say goodnight to both children, she sat in the living room waiting for her husband to arrive. The house felt unnaturally quiet. She realized how much background noise Garrett typically provided, the TV tuned to sports, his work calls, even just the sound of his movements through the house. Now there was only silence, punctuated by the occasional creak of the house settling. At 9:30, Garrett's car pulled into the driveway. Adrian took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever came next. She opened the door before he could knock, not wanting the sound to potentially wake the children. Garrett stood on the porch, looking uncertain, as if he wasn't sure he was welcome in his own home. He had changed clothes since the previous day, wearing a button-down shirt she didn't recognize. The thought of where he might have spent the night, and with whom, sent a fresh wave of pain through her. "Come in," she said quietly, stepping aside. He entered, his familiar cologne wafting past her. How strange that he still smelled the same when everything else had changed so dramatically. They sat in the living room, an awkward distance between them on the sectional sofa they had picked out together 3 years ago, arguing good-naturedly about leather versus fabric, until they compromised on this gray microfiber that had proven remarkably resistant to the spills and stains of family life. "How are the kids?" Garrett asked, breaking the silence. "Dexter believes you're on a business trip." Cindy knows the truth. His eyebrows shot up. "You told her?" "I didn't have to. She figured it out on her own. She heard us talking last night." Garrett rubbed his face with his hands. "God, I'm sorry. She shouldn't have to deal with this." "None of us should," Adrian pointed out. "But here we are." He nodded, accepting the rebuke. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since last night. And I ended things with Jessica this morning." Adrian hadn't expected that. She had been preparing herself for him to announce he was leaving her, that he had found someone new he wanted to be with. His words left her momentarily speechless. "Why?" she finally managed. "Because I realized what I was risking, what I was throwing away." Garrett leaned forward, his expression earnest. 16 years, Adrian. 2 amazing kids. A life we built together. I was a fool to jeopardize all of that. Adrian felt a complex mix of emotions: relief, anger, suspicion, and a stubborn flicker of hope she wasn't ready to acknowledge. So what? Now everything goes back to normal? You made a mistake? You're sorry? And we all move on? Garrett shook his head. No, I know it's not that simple. I know I've broken your trust. I know I've hurt you deeply. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, or maybe ever. But I want a chance to try to make this right. How? The question was simple, but loaded with the weight of everything that had happened. I don't know exactly, he admitted. Counseling, maybe? Time? Whatever you need. I just know I don't want to lose my family. Adrian studied him, trying to gauge his sincerity. Was this genuine remorse, or just fear of consequences? Was he truly sorry for the affair, or just sorry he got caught? And even if he was genuinely remorseful, was that enough to rebuild what had been broken? I need time to think, she said finally. This isn't a decision I can make tonight. Garrett nodded, looking relieved that she hadn't immediately rejected the possibility of reconciliation. I understand. Should I stay somewhere else for now? The question hung between them, fraught with implications. If she asked him to leave again, she was effectively moving them one step closer to separation. If she invited him to stay, she was tacitly accepting his presence back in their home, if not yet in their marriage. Adrienne thought of Dexter's face lighting up whenever Garrett walked through the door, of the questions she would have to field if Daddy's business trip continued indefinitely. She thought of the practical realities of their lives, school drop-offs and pickups, work schedules, household maintenance, and she thought of herself, of whether having Garrett under the same roof would make her healing process harder or easier. You can stay in the guest room, she decided, for now, for the kids' sake. Relief washed over Garrett's features. Thank you. I promise I'll respect your space. As he went to retrieve his bag from the car, Adrienne sat motionless on the sofa, wondering if she had just made a wise decision or a terrible mistake. Only time would tell. The next morning, Adrienne woke to the disorienting sound of activity in the kitchen. For a moment, she couldn't place what felt strange about it. Then she remembered that Garrett had spent the night in the guest room. She had expected awkward silence, not the familiar clatter of breakfast preparation. She pulled on her robe and made her way downstairs. In the kitchen, she found Garrett standing at the stove, flipping pancakes while Dexter sat at the island counter, legs swinging as he chattered excitedly. And then the T-Rex goes roar and stomps everything, Dexter was saying, his hands mimicking giant dinosaur feet, crushing imaginary buildings. Whoa, sounds pretty scary, Garrett replied, sliding a perfectly golden pancake onto a plate. But I bet the brave little Triceratops wasn't afraid, was he? Nope. He has 3 horns and a shield on his head. He's super brave. Garrett looked up as Adrienne entered, his expression a mixture of uncertainty and hope. Good morning, he said carefully. I made pancakes. Thought it might be nice for the kids before school. Adrienne nodded, moving to the coffee maker. Thanks. Her response was clipped, not yet ready for normal domestic conversation. Dexter, however, was thrilled with the situation. Mom, Dad came home from his trip early, and he's making dinosaur pancakes. I see that, Adrienne said, forcing a smile for her son's benefit. That's great. Cindy entered the kitchen then, already dressed for school in jeans and a slouchy sweater, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun. She stopped short at the sight of her father, her eyes immediately darting to Adrienne with a silent question. Morning, Cindy, Garrett said, his voice overly cheerful. Pancake? Cindy's eyes narrowed slightly. I thought you were staying at a hotel. An uncomfortable silence fell over the kitchen. Dexter looked up, confusion clouding his young face. Hotel? I thought you were on a business trip, Dad. Garrett shot a helpless glance at Adrienne. Dad's business trip ended early, Adrienne interjected smoothly. So he came home late last night after you were already asleep. Dexter accepted this explanation easily, returning to his breakfast with enthusiasm. Cindy, however, continued to scrutinize her parents, clearly not buying the convenient story. Can I talk to you for a minute, Mom? She asked, gesturing toward the hallway. Adrienne nodded, following her daughter out of the kitchen. Once they were out of earshot, Cindy turned to face her, arms crossed. What's he doing here? I thought you were going to divorce him. Adrienne sighed, running a hand through her uncombed hair. It's complicated, honey. Your father and I are trying to figure things out. I haven't decided anything definitive yet. He cheated on you, Cindy said, her voice a harsh whisper. What's there to figure out? Adult relationships sometimes have nuances that aren't black and white. There's 16 years of marriage to consider. Your brother, our home. So you're just taking him back? Just like that? Adrienne placed her hands on her daughter's shoulders, looking her directly in the eyes. No, not just like that. Nothing has been decided. Your father is staying in the guest room for now while we work through some things. I'm not making any permanent decisions without a lot of thought. Cindy didn't look convinced, but her posture relaxed slightly. Promise you won't just forgive him because it's easier. You deserve better than that, Mom. The maturity in her daughter's concern brought a lump to Adrienne's throat. I promise. Whatever decision I make will be what's best for all of us in the long run, not just what's easiest right now. Cindy nodded, apparently satisfied with this answer. Okay, but if he hurts you again, I'm going to personally kick him out. Despite everything, Adrienne had to smile at her daughter's fierce protectiveness. Noted. Now go eat something before school. Even if you're mad at your dad, his pancakes are still good. When they returned to the kitchen, Garrett was cleaning up while Dexter finished his breakfast. The domesticity of the scene was jarring given the circumstances, like watching actors perform a familiar play where one character had suddenly been rewritten. Breakfast passed with stilted conversation. Adrienne and Garrett carefully avoiding any meaningful eye contact while maintaining a facade of normalcy for Dexter's benefit. Cindy remained mostly silent, occasionally shooting her father looks that ranged from suspicious to outright hostile. After the children left for school, Adrienne and Garrett found themselves alone in the kitchen. The artificial normality they had maintained for Dexter's sake evaporated, leaving an awkward vacuum in its place. I can work from the office today, Garrett offered, clearly sensing her discomfort. Give you some space. Adrienne nodded. I think that would be best. Adrienne, he began, his voice softening, I meant what I said last night. I want to try to fix this. I know I've made a terrible mistake, but our marriage means everything to me. She looked at him then, really looked at him for the first time since discovering his betrayal. The man standing before her was both achingly familiar and somehow a stranger. The same gray-blue eyes she had fallen in love with, now shadowed with regret. The same strong hands that had held hers through 16 years of marriage, now fidgeting nervously with a dish towel. If our marriage meant everything to you, she said quietly, we wouldn't be in this position. Garrett winced at her words, but didn't argue. You're right. I have no excuse. All I can say is that I lost sight of what's truly important. and I'm desperate to find my way back." Adrian wanted to believe him. Part of her, the part that remembered their first apartment, the birth of their children, the thousands of small moments that had built their life together, wanted to accept his contrition at face value and begin the process of healing. But another part of her, the part that had lain awake all night staring at the ceiling, couldn't stop picturing him with someone else. Jessica Brennan. Even the name felt like a slap. "I need to know something," she said suddenly. "And I need you to be completely honest." Garrett straightened, his expression serious. "Anything." How far did it go? With Jessica. The question had been burning inside her since his confession. She wasn't sure she wanted the answer, but not knowing seemed worse, somehow. Garrett's gaze dropped to the floor. "Adrian, does it really matter? It's over now, and it matters to me," she interrupted, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. "I need to know what I'm forgiving, if I decide to forgive." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she had seen countless times throughout their marriage. It wasn't, there were moments, touches, kisses, but we never slept together?" Adrian finished for him. Garrett shook his head. "No. We came close once, but I couldn't go through with it." Adrian wasn't sure if this revelation made things better or worse. On one hand, there was a small relief in knowing the physical betrayal hadn't gone to its ultimate conclusion. On the other hand, the emotional infidelity, the secret conversations, the hidden smiles, the deliberate deception, was in many ways just as painful. "Why her?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Garrett looked startled. "What? Why Jessica? What was it about her that made you risk everything we built?" He seemed genuinely taken aback by the question, as if he hadn't considered it himself. I don't know. She was just there. She paid attention to me, made me feel seen. And I didn't?" Adrian couldn't keep the hurt from her voice. "After 16 years together, you didn't feel seen by your own wife?" "It's not that simple," Garrett said, frustration creeping into his tone. "We've been so caught up in routines, work, kids, house maintenance. When was the last time we really talked, Adrienne? Not about schedules or bills or the kids, but really talked, like we used to." The accusation stung, partly because there was truth to it. Their marriage had fallen into comfortable patterns over the years, the passion and curiosity of their early relationship gradually replaced by the practical necessities of running a household and raising children. But that didn't justify betrayal. "So, this is partly my fault?" Adrienne asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "I got too busy being a mother and a working professional to make you feel seen enough. So you found someone who would?" "No, that's not what I'm saying," Garrett backpedaled quickly. "The affair was entirely my fault, my weakness, my mistake. I'm just trying to explain where my head was at, not excuse what I did." Adriana took a deep breath, tamping down the anger that threatened to overwhelm her. This wasn't productive. If they were going to have any hope of salvaging their marriage, if she even wanted to salvage it, they needed to move beyond recriminations. "I think you should go to work now," she said finally. "We can talk more tonight." Garrett nodded, accepting the dismissal. He gathered his laptop bag and keys, pausing at the kitchen doorway. "For what it's worth, I never stopped loving you." Not for a single day. After he left, Adrian sat at the kitchen island for a long time, turning his words over in her mind. Could someone betray a person they truly loved? Was love enough to rebuild trust once it had been shattered? She had no answers, only more questions. The days that followed established a new, uncomfortable routine. Garrett continued sleeping in the guest room, joining them for family meals, but giving Adrian space otherwise. Dexter, blissfully unaware of the tension between his parents, was thrilled to have his father home from the business trip. Cindy remained wary and protective, her teenage perceptiveness picking up on every strained interaction. A week into this arrangement, Adrian returned home from grocery shopping to find Garrett in the kitchen, flour dusting his clothes as he pulled a pie from the oven. "What's this?" she asked, setting down the shopping bags. Apple pie, he answered, a tentative smile on his face. I remembered how much you loved the one from that bakery in Vermont during our anniversary trip 5 years ago. I found a recipe that looked similar and thought I'd try it. The gesture was unexpected, touching a place in Adrienne's heart she had been trying to keep guarded. She remembered that trip vividly. A rare weekend away without the children, exploring small towns in New England during peak fall foliage. They had stumbled upon a tiny bakery and ordered slices of apple pie that were so good they went back the next day for more. That's thoughtful, she managed, not quite ready to offer more encouragement, but unable to dismiss the effort entirely. I'm trying, Adrienne, Garrett said softly. I know a pie doesn't fix anything, but I want to show you I'm serious about making amends, about remembering what matters. Before she could respond, the front door burst open and Dexter ran in, fresh from his play date at a neighbor's house. Is that P.I.? He exclaimed, his eyes wide. Awesome! The moment between Adrienne and Garrett passed, submerged beneath the wave of Dexter's enthusiasm. But later, as they all sat around the table, enjoying slices of the surprisingly delicious pie, Adrienne caught Garrett watching her with a hopeful expression. She quickly looked away, not ready to give him the reassurance he clearly sought. That night, after the children were in bed, Adrienne sat in the living room with a glass of wine, scrolling through photos on her phone. Without intending to, she had found herself looking at pictures from their Crystal anniversary celebration just a year ago. There they were, smiling into the camera, Crystal champagne flutes raised in a toast. She remembered Garrett's speech that night, how he had talked about transparency and strength, the dual qualities of Crystal that he said reflected their marriage. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was so absorbed in her thoughts that she didn't hear Garrett approach until he spoke. We looked happy there, he said quietly, gesturing to the phone screen. Adrienne didn't look up. We were, or at least, I thought we were. Garrett sat on the opposite end of the sofa, maintaining the respectful distance he'd established since moving into the guest room. We were, he insisted. That night was real, Adrienne. Every word I said, every promise I made, I meant it all. I just failed to live up to it. He finally looked at him, searching his face for signs of the man she had married, the man she had believed would never hurt her this way. When did it start with Jessica? After our anniversary? Garrett nodded. About 2 months after. There was a company retreat in April. We were assigned to the same project team. It started with just talking, working late, then coffee outside of work. Then you started lying to me about where you were and who you were with. Adrienne finished for him. Yes, he admitted, his shoulders slumping. One small deception led to another, and before I knew it, I was living a double life. It sounds so cliché, I know, but it's the truth. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of his confession settling between them like a physical presence. I saw Dr. Winters again today, Adrienne said eventually. Garrett's head snapped up, alarm clear in his eyes. The divorce lawyer? Yes. I wanted to understand my options, regardless of what we decide to do. And what did she say? His voice was carefully controlled, but Adrienne could hear the fear underneath. She said that an uncontested divorce would be the simplest path, but even then there would be complications with the house, the investments, and, of course, custody arrangements for the kids. Garrett's face paled. Custody? Adrienne, please tell me you're not thinking of taking the kids away from me. I'm not, she assured him quickly. Whatever else has happened between us, you're a good father. I would never try to come between you and the children. But any divorce would require formal arrangements. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. I don't want a divorce, Adrienne. I want to fix this. I want us to heal and move forward together. I know that's what you want, she said carefully. I'm still trying to figure out what I want. The truth was, Adrienne was torn. Part of her wanted to believe in the possibility of reconciliation, to accept Garrett's remorse and work toward rebuilding their marriage. But another part of her wondered if the trust that had been broken could ever truly be restored. Would she spend the rest of her life wondering if he was really working late or checking his phone for suspicious messages? Could she ever look at him again without seeing the betrayal? "I need more time," she said finally. "This isn't a decision I can rush into, either way." Garrett nodded, accepting her words without pushing further. "I understand. I'm grateful for any chance to prove myself to you again." As he stood to leave the room, Adrienne found herself speaking without planning to. The pie was good. Dexter loved it. A small smile curved Garrett's lips. "Thanks. Maybe I'll try making that chocolate soufflé you always order for your birthday next." It was such a normal exchange, so reminiscent of their conversations before everything fell apart, that for a brief moment, Adrienne could almost forget the pain between them. Almost. After Garrett went upstairs, Adrienne remained on the sofa, contemplating the strange limbo they now inhabited, neither together nor apart, trying to navigate a path forward through unfamiliar terrain. She thought of Cindy's fierce protection, of Dexter's innocent joy at having his father home, of her own conflicted heart torn between anger and the lingering remnants of a 16-year love. There were no easy answers, no clear path forward, only choices to be made, day by day, as they all adjusted to this new reality. Outside, rain began to fall, gentle at first, and then with increasing intensity, drumming against the windows like a heartbeat. Adrienne closed her eyes and listened, finding a strange comfort in the steady rhythm of the storm. 2 weeks after Garrett's confession, Adrienne found herself in the unfamiliar position of getting ready for a company event alone. The annual spring fundraiser at her insurance firm was typically an event they attended as a couple. Garrett dutifully donning a suit and making small talk with her colleagues, while she did the same at his corporate functions. It was an unspoken agreement they'd maintained throughout their marriage. A united front in professional settings regardless of whatever disagreements they might be having in private. But this year was different. This year, she stood before her closet alone, deliberating over which dress to wear, while Garrett lingered awkwardly in the doorway of the master bedroom. "Are you sure you don't want me to come?" he asked for the third time that evening. "I don't mind. It might be good for us to get out together. Do something normal." Adrienne pulled out a navy blue cocktail dress, holding it up for consideration. "I'm sure. I already told them I'd be coming alone." She caught his reflection in the mirror, saw the hurt flash across his face before he masked it with understanding. "Okay, I'll stay with the kids then." Part of her felt guilty for excluding him, for breaking their long-standing tradition. But another part, the part still raw from his betrayal, needed this space, this small act of independence. Tonight, she would be Adrienne Hawthorne, account manager, not half of the Hawthorns, the Navy one, Garrett said suddenly, nodding toward the dress in her hands. "It's always been my favorite on you." His comment sent an unexpected wave of emotion through her. Not anger or resentment, but a complex nostalgia for the simplicity of before, when his opinion on her dress would have been welcomed rather than complicated by everything that now stood between them. "Thank you," she said quietly, laying the navy dress on the bed. Garrett retreated from the doorway, leaving Adrienne to finish getting ready in solitude. She applied her makeup with careful precision, the ritual bringing a sense of control that had been lacking in her personal life lately. As she fastened her mother's pearl earrings, a wedding gift she'd worn to every important occasion since, she studied her reflection. The woman looking back at her seemed simultaneously familiar and strange, like a portrait slightly altered by an artist's interpretation. Downstairs, she found Garrett helping Dexter with a model dinosaur kit at the dining table, while Cindy texted on the couch, occasionally glancing up to offer commentary on their progress. "You look beautiful, Mom," Cindy said, setting her phone down as Adrienne entered. Garrett looked up, his expression softening as he took in the sight of her. "Stunning," he agreed quietly. Dexter, more concerned with the tyrannosaur arm he was attempting to attach, barely glanced up. "Are you going to a party?" Can you bring me cake? Adrienne laughed, grateful for her son's straightforward priorities. If there's cake, I'll try to smuggle you a piece. She gathered her clutch and keys, suddenly feeling awkward in her own home. I'll be back by 11, probably. Dexter should be in bed by 8:30. Adrienne, Garrett interrupted gently. I know the kids' schedules. We'll be fine. Of course he knew. Despite everything else, Garrett had always been an involved father who shared in the parenting responsibilities. It was one of the things that had made their partnership work so well for so many years. Right. Well, goodbye then. As she drove to the hotel where the fundraiser was being held, Adrienne found her thoughts drifting to Jessica Brennan. Was she young and vibrant, without the responsibilities and history that Adrienne carried? Did she laugh more easily, flirt more naturally? Was she the kind of woman who would never need to remind a man about bedtimes and dinner plans? She forced the thoughts away. Comparing herself to Jessica was a path to madness, not healing. The fundraiser was being held in the grand ballroom of the Westmore Hotel, an elegant space transformed for the evening with twinkling lights and spring flower arrangements. Adrienne made her way through the crowd, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and scanning the room for familiar faces. Adrienne, you made it! Her boss, Martin Reynolds, approached with a warm smile. Where's Garrett tonight? He couldn't make it, she replied, the practiced excuse rolling off her tongue easily. Work commitment, Martin nodded sympathetically. The corporate world never sleeps, does it? Well, come say hello to the team from the East Coast office. They've been dying to meet the woman behind our most successful client retention numbers. The evening progressed pleasantly enough. Adrienne found herself genuinely enjoying the professional camaraderie, the absence of the emotional tension that had permeated her home for the past weeks. Here, she was valued for her competence and contributions, her personal struggles invisible beneath her polished exterior. During a lull in the conversations, she stepped out onto the hotel's terrace for a moment of quiet. The spring night was cool but not uncomfortable, the city skyline glittering against the dark canvas of the sky. Needed some air, too? A voice asked from the shadows. Adrienne turned to find David Mercer, a colleague from the claims department, leaning against the balustrade with a tumbler of what looked like whiskey. Just a quick break from the small talk, she admitted with a small smile. David nodded understandingly. These events are always 1 hour of actual substance, wrapped in 3 hours of weather discussions and golf anecdotes. She laughed, appreciating his candor. David was relatively new to the company, transferred from the Seattle office 6 months ago. They had worked together on a few projects, and she had found him intelligent and refreshingly straightforward. I noticed you came solo tonight, he said after a moment, his tone carefully casual. So did I. Maybe we could keep each other company for the speeches? Might make the mandatory motivational platitudes more bearable? The invitation was friendly, with just the faintest hint of something more in his eyes. Adrienne felt a flutter of something unexpected. Not attraction exactly, but the simple recognition of being seen as a woman, not just a colleague or a mother or a betrayed wife. I should probably head back inside, she said gently, but thank you for the offer. As she turned to leave, David called after her. Adrienne, if you ever want to grab lunch sometime just to talk shop or whatever, my door's always open. She nodded, offering a polite smile before returning to the ballroom. The brief interaction had unsettled her more than she cared to admit. Not because David had been inappropriate, he hadn't, but because her own reaction revealed how vulnerable she still felt, how uncertain of her place in the world outside her marriage. The rest of the event passed in a blur of speeches and networking. By 10:30, Adrienne was ready to leave, the professional mask she had maintained all evening beginning to slip as fatigue set in. She said her goodbyes and retrieved her car from the valet, eager to return to the quiet of her own space. As she drove home, her thoughts returned to Garrett. Would reconciliation ever be possible? Could she learn to trust him again? Was staying together for the children reason enough to try? The house was quiet when she arrived. The downstairs lights dimmed to a soft glow. She found Garrett in the living room, reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed documents on his laptop. He looked up as she entered, setting the computer aside. How was the fundraiser? Adrienne slipped off her heels, feeling the relief of pressure released from her feet. Fine. The usual corporate rah-rah speeches and silent auction. Garrett nodded, watching her with careful eyes. The kids went to bed without any drama. Dexter wanted me to tell you he's still expecting cake. She smiled despite herself. Of course he is. I'll have to disappoint him. No cake tonight. A comfortable silence settled between them, the kind that only comes from years of sharing a space with another person. For a moment, it almost felt normal, like any other night after any other corporate function. You look tired, Garrett observed. Long evening? Adrienne agreed, sinking onto the opposite end of the couch. Lot of networking. Lot of questions about where you were. Garrett's expression turned apologetic. I'm sorry. That must have been awkward. She shrugged. It was fine. I told everyone you had a work commitment. Thank you for that. He hesitated, then added, I appreciate you not broadcasting our situation. It's no one else's business, Adrienne said simply. It was true. Despite her anger and hurt, she had no desire to humiliate Garrett publicly or turn their private struggle into gossip for her colleagues. Another silence stretched between them, this one heavier with unspoken thoughts. Adrienne found herself studying Garrett's face, noting the new lines around his eyes, the slight silver at his temples that had appeared in the last year or so. 16 years of shared history, visible in the geography of his features. A colleague asked me to lunch tonight, she said suddenly, not entirely sure why she was sharing this. Garrett's head snapped up, surprise and something darker flashing in his eyes. Oh? Nothing like that, she clarified quickly. Just friendly. But it made me realize I haven't really thought of myself as available for a long time. Garrett set his laptop aside completely, turning to face her more fully. Are you? Available, I mean. The question hung between them, loaded with implications. Adrienne considered how to answer. In the strictest technical sense, perhaps she was. They were living separately, under the same roof, their marriage in a state of suspension. But emotionally, that was far more complicated. I don't know, she answered honestly. I don't feel available, but I don't exactly feel married either. Not the way I did before. Garrett nodded slowly, absorbing her words. For what it's worth, I still feel married. Completely. Despite everything I did to jeopardize that. Adrienne didn't respond immediately, letting his statement settle in the room. Part of her wanted to lash out, to remind him that feelings didn't erase actions, that his continued emotional commitment meant little in the face of his betrayal. But she was too tired for anger tonight, too drained from maintaining her professional facade all evening. I'm going to bed, she said finally, rising from the couch. Good night, Garrett. Good night, Adrienne. As she climbed the stairs, she could feel his eyes following her, filled with longing and regret in equal measure. The next morning brought a semblance of weekend normalcy, with Dexter's Saturday morning cartoons filling the house with animated voices and Cindy sleeping in behind her closed door. Adrienne found Garrett in the kitchen, whisking pancake batter with focused attention. You're making pancakes again? She asked, reaching for a coffee mug. Thought it might be nice. Weekend tradition and all. He glanced up, offering a tentative smile. Plus, I'm trying to perfect my dinosaur shapes for Dexter. The T-Rex still looks more like a deformed turtle. Despite herself, Adrienne felt a smile tugging at her lips. Garrett's attempts at creative pancakes had been a source of family amusement for years, his artistic aspirations consistently exceeding his actual skills. The secret is in the wrist movement, she advised, pouring herself coffee. You always flip too enthusiastically. Pancake wisdom from the master, Garrett teased, the interaction feeling surprisingly natural. a brief window into their pre-crisis relationship. The moment was interrupted by Dexter barreling into the kitchen, still in his dinosaur pajamas. "Is breakfast ready? I'm starving. Did you bring me cake, Mom?" Adrian ruffled his sleep-tousled hair. "Sorry, bud, no cake, but Dad's making dinosaur pancakes." "Awesome." Dexter climbed onto a stool at the kitchen island, watching with anticipation as Garrett attempted to pour batter in the shape of a stegosaurus. "That looks like a lumpy dog, Dad." "It's abstract," Garrett defended with mock seriousness. "Modern dinosaur art." Adrian watched their interaction, a familiar warmth spreading through her chest at the sight of her son's unrestrained joy and her husband's playful response. These moments, the simple, everyday occurrences of family life, were what she had feared losing most when she first discovered Garrett's betrayal. Not the grand romantic gestures or special occasions, but these quiet Saturday mornings filled with bad pancake art and sleepy laughter. Later that day, while Garrett took Dexter to his Little League practice, Adrian found Cindy in her room, headphones on as she sketched in her art pad. She knocked on the door frame, waiting for her daughter to acknowledge her. "Hey, Mom," Cindy said, pulling off her headphones. "What's up?" Adrian sat on the edge of the bed. "Just checking in. We haven't had much time to talk lately with everything going on." Cindy set her sketchbook aside, tucking her legs underneath her. "You mean with Dad being back, but not really back?" "That's one way to put it," Adrian acknowledged with a small smile. "How are you feeling about all of this?" Cindy considered the question, her young face serious. "Honestly, I'm confused. One minute I'm super angry at Dad for what he did to you, and the next, I'm kind of glad he's still here because Dexter is so happy. And then I feel guilty for being glad, because it feels like I'm taking his side or something." Adrian reached out to squeeze her daughter's hand. "You don't have to pick sides, honey. It's okay to love your dad and be angry with him at the same time. It's okay to be confused." "Are you confused too?" Cindy asked, studying her mother's face with perception beyond her years. Adrian sighed, deciding to be honest. "Yes, very. There's no handbook for this situation, you know. No clear right or wrong answer. Do you think you'll stay together? For real? I mean, not just living in the same house like awkward roommates." The question was direct, as Cindy's questions tended to be. Adrian appreciated her daughter's straightforwardness, even as she struggled to formulate an answer. "I don't know yet. Your father wants to try to repair our marriage, and part of me wants that too. But trust, once it's broken, is very difficult to rebuild." Cindy nodded thoughtfully. "In my health class, we talked about how forgiveness is more for yourself than for the other person. So you don't have to carry around all that anger and hurt. But that doesn't mean you have to let the person back into your life the same way as before." Adrian smiled, touched by her daughter's wisdom. "That's very insightful, Cindy. And you're right. Forgiveness and reconciliation are two different things." "For what it's worth," Cindy said, her voice softening. "Dad seems really sorry. Like, genuinely sorry. Not just sorry, he got caught sorry." "I think he is," Adrian agreed. "But sometimes being sorry isn't enough to undo the damage that's been done." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the weight of the conversation settling around them. Finally, Cindy spoke again, her voice small. "Whatever you decide, I just want you to be happy, Mom. And I want Dexter to be okay. He's just a kid, you know? He shouldn't have to deal with this stuff." Adrian pulled her daughter into a hug, overwhelmed by the maturity and compassion in her words. "I know, sweetheart. I'm trying to make the best decision for everyone, I promise." As she left Cindy's room, Adrian felt both heavier and lighter, burdened by the responsibility of deciding the future of their family, yet comforted by the knowledge that her daughter, at least, would understand whatever choice she ultimately made. The sound of the front door opening announced Garrett and Dexter's return from baseball practice. Dexter's excited voice carried up the stairs, recounting some triumph on the field. Adrienne paused at the top of the stairs, listening to Garrett's enthusiastic responses, the easy rapport between father and son untouched by the adult complications swirling around them. For Dexter's sake, for Cindy's sake, for her own sake, what was the right path forward? The question had no easy answer, only the certainty that whatever she decided would irreversibly shape all their lives. With a deep breath, she descended the stairs to greet them, pasting on a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. One day at a time, she reminded herself. That was all any of them could do for now. 2 months had passed since the morning Adrienne confronted Garrett about the text message, and life had settled into an uneasy routine. Garrett continued to sleep in the guest room, joining family meals and activities while carefully maintaining the emotional boundaries Adrienne had established. He had taken over more household responsibilities, cooking elaborate weekend meals, handling Dexter's sports commitments, even tackling the garden that had always been primarily Adrienne's domain. To an outside observer, the Hawthorne family might have appeared almost normal, but beneath the surface, important questions remained unanswered, decisions unmade. On a warm Saturday afternoon, Adrienne found herself alone in the house, a rare occurrence these days. Garrett had taken both children to an outdoor adventure park, an all-day excursion planned weeks in advance. The solitude felt both liberating and disorienting, like stepping into a vacuum after months of emotional pressure. She wandered through the empty rooms, touching familiar objects that held 16 years of shared history. The weathered leather armchair Garrett had insisted on bringing from his bachelor apartment when they first moved in together. The crystal vase they'd received as a wedding gift, still positioned prominently on the mantel despite the irony of its symbolism. The family photos chronicling their journey, Garrett holding newborn Cindy with a look of terrified wonder, both of them kneeling beside Dexter on his first bicycle, the 4 of them in matching sweaters for last year's Christmas card, smiling at a camera that couldn't capture the fractures already forming in their foundation. In their bedroom, Adrienne opened her jewelry box and removed the sapphire earrings Garrett had given her for their crystal anniversary. She hadn't worn them since that fateful morning, but today, for reasons she couldn't fully articulate, she fastened them to her ears and studied her reflection. The deep blue stones caught the afternoon light, sparkling with unexpected brilliance. The doorbell interrupted her contemplation. She wasn't expecting anyone, and for a brief, irrational moment, she wondered if it might be Jessica Brennan, coming to stake her claim or offer some explanation. The thought sent a surge of anxiety through her as she descended the stairs. But when she opened the door, she found Dr. Catherine Winters on her porch, looking polished and professional, even in casual weekend attire. "Dr. Winters," Adrienne said, surprised. "I didn't expect to see you today." The lawyer smiled apologetically. "I'm sorry for dropping by unannounced. I was in the neighborhood for another matter and realized I had some paperwork you'd requested. I thought I'd drop it off rather than wait until Monday." "That's very thoughtful. Please come in." Adrienne led her to the kitchen, where she offered coffee that Dr. Winters accepted gratefully. As she prepared the drinks, she was acutely aware of the lawyer's assessing gaze taking in the details of the home. The family calendar on the refrigerator with Garrett's handwriting, alongside Adrienne's, his jacket hanging by the door, the 2 coffee mugs drying on the rack from that morning's breakfast. "You seem more settled than when I last saw you," Dr. Winters observed, accepting the steaming mug. "If you don't mind my saying so." Adrienne sat across from her at the kitchen island. "It's been a process. We're still figuring things out." Dr. Winters nodded, removing a folder from her briefcase. "That's why I thought these might be useful. The asset division worksheets you asked about, along with some standard custody arrangement templates. Just for your information, of course." Adrienne took the folder, setting it aside without opening it. "Thank you." The lawyer studied her for a moment, then spoke with gentle directness. "Adrienne, I've been doing this a long time. I've seen hundreds of marriages in crisis. May I speak frankly? Please." Most of my clients who reach the point of consulting a divorce attorney have already made their decision, whether they realize it or not. They come seeking confirmation, not advice. But you, she paused, choosing her words carefully, you seem genuinely undecided, and that's okay. It's a profound decision that will affect the rest of your life and your children's lives. Adrienne stared into her coffee cup, watching the steam rise and dissipate. How do I know which choice is right? Staying feels like accepting the unacceptable. Leaving feels like destroying everything we've built. Dr. Winters's expression softened with understanding. There's rarely a perfect answer in these situations, only the answer that's right for you. And sometimes, you have to listen to what your heart is telling you, even when your mind is still making lists of pros and cons. After the lawyer left, Adrienne sat with the unopened folder, her thoughts tumultuous. What was her heart telling her, beneath the layers of hurt and anger? Did she still love Garrett enough to rebuild? Could she ever trust him again? Would staying together for the children's sake lead to happiness, or merely postpone inevitable heartbreak? She was still sitting there when her phone rang. Garrett's name flashed on the screen. "Hello," she answered, a strange premonition sending a chill down her spine. "Adrienne." His voice was tight, controlled in that way she recognized from moments of crisis. "Don't panic, but there's been an accident. We're at Memorial Hospital." The world seemed to tilt beneath her. "What happened? Are the kids okay?" "The kids are fine," he reassured her quickly. "It's me. I fell on one of the climbing structures, broke my leg, possibly dislocated my shoulder. Nothing life-threatening, but they want to keep me overnight for observation because I hit my head pretty hard, too." Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by concern. "I'm on my way. Where are the children now?" "They're with me. The hospital staff has been amazing. They're keeping them entertained with snacks and some kind of craft project in the family waiting area. But I'm sure they'd feel better if you were here." "I'll be there in 20 minutes, she promised, already searching for her car keys. The hospital was busy for a Saturday afternoon, the emergency department filled with the typical weekend injuries, sports accidents, home improvement mishaps, and the occasional mysterious ailment that couldn't wait until Monday. Adrienne found Cindy and Dexter in the family waiting area, supervised by a kind-faced volunteer who was helping them create elaborate paper airplanes. "Mom!" Dexter launched himself into her arms. "Dad broke his leg. It was so cool. There was blood and everything." "Dexter," Cindy admonished, rolling her eyes. "It wasn't cool. Dad was in pain." Adrienne hugged them both, relieved to find them unharmed. "Where is your father now?" "They took him for some tests," Cindy explained. "X-rays and stuff. He told us to wait here and said you were coming." After ensuring the children were comfortable with the volunteer, Adrienne made her way to the nurse's station, where she was directed to a curtained area in the emergency department. She found Garrett lying on a hospital bed, his right leg elevated and immobilized, his left arm in a sling. A small bandage adorned his temple. "Hey," he said when he saw her, his voice slightly slurred from what she assumed were pain medications. "Sorry about this." Adrienne moved to his bedside, surveying the damage. "What happened?" "Tried to show off for the kids on the advanced climbing wall," he admitted sheepishly. "Turns out I'm not as agile as I was in my 20s. Foot slipped and down I went. Not my proudest moment." Despite everything, a small smile tugged at Adrienne's lips. You never could resist showing off. His eyes met hers, a flash of their old connection passing between them. "The kids, okay?" "They're fine. Dexter thinks your injury is the coolest thing he's ever seen. Cindy's pretending to be annoyed but is secretly impressed by your battle wounds." Garrett laughed, then winced as the movement jostled his injured shoulder. "The doctor says I'll need surgery on the leg. Compound fracture. They're waiting for the orthopedic specialist to review the X-rays, and the shoulder's definitely dislocated, but they popped it back in." "Pretty dramatic way to ruin a fun day out, huh?" "At least you'll have a good story to tell," Adrienne replied, surprised by the easy banter between them. as if the crisis had temporarily suspended the tension that had defined their interactions for months. A doctor entered the curtained area then, introducing herself as Dr. Rivera, the orthopedic specialist. She explained Garrett's injuries in detail: multiple fractures in the right tibia requiring surgical repair, mild dislocation of the left shoulder, and a concussion that warranted overnight observation. "We'll schedule the surgery for tomorrow morning," Dr. Rivera concluded. "He'll need significant assistance during recovery. Non-weight bearing on that leg for at least 6 weeks. Physical therapy after that. Do you have someone who can help at home, Mr. Hawthorne?" Before Garrett could answer, Adrian spoke up. "Yes, he does. He'll be at home with us." The certainty in her voice surprised them both. Garrett looked at her, a question in his eyes that she answered with a slight nod. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something. A decision, at least for now, that she wouldn't abandon him in his moment of need. After the doctor left, a nurse arrived to administer pre-surgical medications and prepare Garrett for transfer to an inpatient room. Adrienne stepped out to check on the children, finding them now engaged in a board game with the volunteer. "Dad's going to be staying in the hospital tonight and having surgery tomorrow," she explained, sitting down beside them. "But he's going to be okay." Dexter's eyes widened. "Surgery? Will they cut his leg open? Can I watch?" "No, you cannot watch," Adrienne replied firmly. "And yes, they need to repair the broken bones in his leg. We'll come visit tomorrow after the procedure is done." "Is he scared?" Cindy asked, her earlier affected nonchalance giving way to genuine concern. Adrienne considered the question. "I think he's more uncomfortable than scared, and probably embarrassed about falling." "Classic Dad," Cindy said, a small smile playing on her lips. "Always trying to be Superman." They stayed until Garrett was transferred to his room, saying their goodbyes with promises to return the next day. As they were leaving, a nurse handed Adrienne a plastic bag containing Garrett's personal effects: his wallet, phone, and the clothes that had been cut away by emergency personnel. "Almost forgot," the nurse said. "His wedding ring, too. We remove all jewelry before surgery." Adrienne accepted the small gold band, its weight familiar in her palm. 16 years of marriage, encapsulated in a simple circle of metal. That night, after the children were asleep, Adrienne sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, turning Garrett's ring over in her fingers. The inside bore the inscription they had chosen together: "For all our days," a promise made in youth and optimism, now tested by the harsh reality of human frailty. Her gaze fell on Garrett's jacket, still hanging by the door, and on impulse, she crossed the room and reached into the inside pocket. Her fingers encountered a small velvet box, the kind that typically held jewelry. Her heart stuttered as she removed it, remembering the credit card charge at Brennan's Jewelry that had first alerted her to his infidelity. For a moment, she hesitated, questioning whether she had the right to open it. But if their marriage had any hope of survival, there could be no more secrets between them. With a deep breath, she lifted the lid. Inside was a pair of earrings, sapphires identical to the ones she was wearing, which matched the ones he had given her for their crystal anniversary. But attached to the box was a small card in Garrett's handwriting, to replace the ones that now symbolize broken promises. "A new pair for a new beginning, if you'll have me. For all our days, G." Tears welled in Adrienne's eyes as she stared at the earrings. He had purchased them weeks ago, before his accident, perhaps planning some grand gesture of reconciliation that fate had now interrupted. The next morning, Adrienne arrived at the hospital alone, having arranged for the children to stay with a neighbor until Garrett's surgery was complete. She found him awake but groggy, anxiety evident in the tense lines of his face. "You came," he said, relief coloring his voice. "Of course I came." She set her purse down and took the chair beside his bed. "How are you feeling?" "Like I fell off a climbing wall," he attempted to joke, but his smile was strained. "They'll be taking me down to surgery in about an hour." Adrienne nodded, studying his face. the familiar features now vulnerable in the harsh hospital lighting. She reached into her pocket and withdrew his wedding ring. "They gave this to me last night," she said, holding it up between them, "for safekeeping." Garrett's eyes fixed on the gold band. "I haven't taken it off since our wedding day," he said quietly. "Not once. Not even during everything that happened." The admission hung in the air between them, laden with meaning. Whatever his failings had been, whatever lines he had crossed, he had never symbolically abandoned their marriage. "I found the earrings," Adrienne said after a moment, "in your jacket pocket." Garrett closed his eyes briefly, a flush coloring his pale cheeks. "I was waiting for the right moment, which, knowing me, probably would have been awkward and poorly timed anyway." "Like now?" she asked, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. "Yeah," he agreed with a self-deprecating laugh. "Like now, me in a hospital gown with a broken leg and a concussion, you having to deal with the fallout of my stupid showing off. Not exactly the romantic scenario I had in mind." Adrienne looked down at the wedding ring in her palm, then back at her husband's face. "Garrett, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest, no matter how difficult the answer might be." He met her gaze steadily. "Anything. If I hadn't confronted you that morning, if I hadn't seen the text message, would you have eventually ended things with Jessica on your own? Or would it have continued?" It was the question that had haunted her for months, the uncertainty that had prevented her from fully committing to either reconciliation or divorce. Garrett seemed to understand the weight of the moment, taking time to consider his response. "I want to say yes," he finally answered, his voice rough with emotion. "I want to tell you I would have come to my senses, that I would have realized what I was risking and stopped on my own. But the honest truth is, I don't know. I was lost in a fog of my own making, Adrienne. Selfish and blind and stupid." He reached for her hand, his fingers trembling slightly. "But what I do know, with absolute certainty, is that from the moment you confronted me, from the moment I saw the pain in your eyes and realized what I had done to you, I have never regretted anything more in my life. And I have never been more certain that you and our children are everything to me. Everything." Tears blurred Adrienne's vision as she listened, his raw honesty touching something deep within her that months of carefully practiced apologies had failed to reach. "I'm not asking you to forget what happened," Garrett continued. "I'm not even asking you to forgive me right now. I'm just asking for a chance to spend the rest of my life proving that I can be the man you deserve, the man I want to be." Before she could respond, a nurse entered to inform them it was time for Garrett to be taken to surgery. Adrienne stood, still holding his wedding ring. "Keep it safe for me?" Garrett asked, vulnerability naked in his eyes. She nodded, closing her fingers around the gold band. "I'll be here when you wake up." The surgery took longer than expected, nearly 4 hours to repair the complex fractures in Garrett's leg. Adrienne waited in the surgical family lounge, alternating between pacing and attempting to distract herself with magazines. Cindy called twice, seeking updates, while Dexter demanded to know if they had used a super big saw to fix Dad's leg. Finally, Dr. Rivera emerged, still in surgical scrubs, to report that the operation had been successful. Garrett would be in recovery for another hour before being returned to his room. "He'll need extensive rehabilitation," the doctor explained, "and he'll be in a significant amount of pain for the first few weeks. The recovery process isn't easy, but with proper support, he should regain full function eventually." "He'll have proper support," Adrienne assured her, the double meaning of her words not lost on either of them. When she was finally allowed to see Garrett, he was still emerging from anesthesia, his eyes unfocused, and his speech slightly slurred. His right leg was immobilized in a heavy cast, elevated on pillows. "Hey," he mumbled when he saw her. "You stayed." "I said I would," she replied, taking the chair beside his bed. "The doctor says the surgery went well. You'll be laid up for a while, but with physical therapy, you should recover completely." Garrett nodded drowsily. "Good. Need both legs working to chase the kids around. Adrian smiled, taking his hand in hers. I've been thinking while you were in surgery. About us. About what happens next. His eyes sharpened slightly, fighting through the fog of medication to focus on her face. And I think, she paused, gathering her thoughts. I think real love isn't about never making mistakes. It's about how we respond when we do. It's about the choice to keep trying, to keep showing up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Hope flickered in Garrett's eyes. What are you saying? Adrian took a deep breath. I'm saying I want to try. Really try. Not just coexisting for the children's sake. I want us to rebuild, to find our way back to each other. It won't be easy. There will be days when I'm still angry, when I still doubt. But I want to choose us, choose our family, and see if we can create something new from what's been broken. Tears slipped down Garrett's cheeks as he tightened his grip on her hand. I don't deserve you, he whispered. Maybe not, she agreed with gentle honesty. But you have me anyway. For better or worse, remember? She reached into her pocket and withdrew his wedding ring, sliding it onto his finger where it belonged. As it settled into place, something shifted between them. Not a magical erasure of the past, but a tentative bridge toward the future. The recovery process was arduous, just as Dr. Rivera had warned. Garrett returned home to a hospital bed set up in the den, unable to navigate the stairs to their bedroom. He endured the pain and frustration of limited mobility, the indignity of needing help with basic tasks, and the slow, incremental progress of physical therapy. Through it all, Adrian remained by his side, not as a passive caretaker but as an active partner in both his physical recovery and the healing of their marriage. They began seeing a therapist together, unpacking the issues that had led to his affair and the changes they both needed to make moving forward. There were difficult conversations, painful revelations, and moments when the past threatened to overshadow their progress. But there were also new discoveries, renewed appreciation, and the gradual rebuilding of trust through consistent actions rather than empty promises. 6 months after Garrett's accident, on the evening of their 17th wedding anniversary, Adrian entered their bedroom to find a trail of rose petals leading to their bed. Garrett stood beside it, finally without crutches or a cane, holding a small box identical to the one she had found in his jacket pocket the night before his surgery. I never got to do this properly, he said, opening the box to reveal the sapphire earrings. A new pair to replace the ones that now carry painful memories. A new beginning, if you'll still have me. Adrian touched the sapphire earrings she was already wearing, the original pair he had given her for their crystal anniversary, which she had recently begun wearing again. Actually, she said with a soft smile, I've decided to keep these ones. Uncertainty flashed across Garrett's face. But I thought, these earrings don't just represent the pain anymore, she explained, removing one to examine it in the lamplight. They represent our entire journey, the beauty we created together, the fractures that nearly destroyed us, and the stronger bond we're forging now. I don't want to erase our past, Garrett. It's part of who we are. Understanding dawned in his eyes as she continued. But I would love to have the new pair too, she added, reaching for the box in his hand. One pair to remind us where we've been, one to symbolize where we're going, both equally valuable, equally true. Garrett set the box aside and drew her into his arms, his eyes shining with emotion. I love you, Adrienne, more now than ever before, which I wouldn't have thought possible a year ago. I love you too, she whispered, the words feeling both familiar and brand new on her lips. As they held each other in the soft evening light, Adrienne reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. Their marriage, like the crystal they had celebrated on their 15th anniversary, had proven both more fragile and more resilient than they had ever imagined. It had shattered under pressure, revealing unexpected fractures in its seemingly perfect surface. But they had gathered the pieces together, not to recreate what was lost, but to build something new, a mosaic of their shared history, their individual growth, and their mutual commitment to a future together. And like the kintsugi pottery Cindy had learned about in art class, where broken vessels are mended with gold to highlight rather than hide their repair, their marriage now bore the visible marks of having been broken and lovingly restored. The result was not perfect. It would never be the same as it was before. But in its imperfection, in the golden seams that now held them together, there was a deeper beauty, a more authentic strength, and a hard-won wisdom that perfect crystal could never possess. It was, Adrian realized, as Garrett's lips found hers, the most valuable kind of love. Not the untested devotion of young romance, but the deliberate choice to see each other fully, flaws and all, and still choose to walk forward together for all their days. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.